get something for these things. There we go. Oh, better. Okay, Selena update. This is update 7. We had Selena outside last time, her return back. We have pretty much stripped the car to get all of the welding done. We demoed the sheet metal out. I know it looks really rough in here, but what this is this is the dash shell. Just gonna pull this stuff out. These are all the protection items for the doors. The reason we didn't take the doors out, so you're like, why not just take the doors out or take the door panels off? That's because when I build the dash and even start design work on the dash, I want to take all the shapes and I want to take the vibe of the door panels and make sure that it's reading into the dash or the instrument panel. So, you know, if we need to do grinding or something, all this stuff can be taped back on, but it looks like shit. Suspect. We're gonna hope this stays. Goal right now is to get all the welding done on the whole chassis. So when we start adding this stuff, we're not having a double back. There is a lot, like we talked about in the rear portion, that needs to just be cleaned up and gone over. The sheet metal that was on the A-pillars here is gone. Did the best we could. Luke got after this, got most of this stuff off here, scotch-free. There's no more HVAC in here. This is just the shell. Why we have this here is just Pilgrim came down, sat in this thing, got seated, made sure we had the seat adjustment where we wanted to for his size. That we took measurements on. The harness bars that were here that ran off of this junction, these were too close to the seat when it was in its final position, so we're gonna draw those out towards the rear more. The shell here, which I just, if I touch this, it'll probably fall. You can see it's kind of cattywampus. This is just gonna give us dimensional constraints for drawing. So I'll get the seats mounted and then we'll have the steering wheel put back in there. We know that the foot controls and the steering wheel were in a good spot. Maybe just a little bit of adjustment rearward towards the driver. And then this, I can take a picture, you know, like right here, and I can start sketching out the instrument panel, the center console, and how we want things to look. Ideas on welding this stuff. So, you know, we're multitasking super heavy. I'm the one that welds the chassis, so a lot of this is falling into time management of how I can produce on the other cars and still take care of this, and that's just turning into long days and weekends. Super good on that. Let's look at the front really quick. Most of this is welded. Some of the stuff we started adding on when we stopped working on the project didn't get done. So what I'm doing now is going through and just, like I said, everything I know that we're gonna leave on here is getting welded. The only thing that sucks is I don't know about these engine mounts. Those might not be coming with us. I just wanna go through and get everything before we start adding layers. Sometimes I've even been guilty of it myself. If we end up adding like panels or brackets or something, and something needs a nice clean pass over it, like a long rip, it's super inefficient to start adding that stuff. So you wanna like weld in steps. Engine mounts are gonna lead us into a cool conversation. First thing I wanna do was get all the sheet metal in the front welded, and that's what you see is pretty much done here. There's sheet metal, some of the uglier stuff where it's the tubes exiting the top of the chassis. Those are done. Problem with cars that sit and are stored in different places or are getting tons of coatings on them, like to preserve them and not rust, is at the end of the day, they still will rust in some places. Getting the coating off to properly weld it is fairly easy with structural stuff. But when it turns into like sheet metal, or especially where it's factory sheet metal to like cold roll 18 gauge or 16 gauge, It's just hard to clean that stuff, and the silicone bronze, it's not as forgiving as like welding chromoly or welding plate steel, because you know the silicone bronze rod, same thing, you don't get multiple passes on it, you get one chance. It brings all the impurities of the parent materials up into the surface, so you want to have like the best chance possible to running clean passes on that stuff. So that's what I figured we'd do first, is get all the hard stuff out of the way. So the wheel clearance on the firewall is done, the upper portions are done. That's why the door was unbolted, just to get through the seam here. And then what I've started is just on this side, root passing. So just ugly, hot passes, you know, no pedal pulse, just something super consistent rod input. The engine mounts. And this is a sway bar. I'm really excited about this. This has a big chunky arm that's gonna go out here. That'll be a machined arm. And it's got like a long tie rod system. All of the new parts are ordered. So Cho race beams on the front, big TTB, big 1.5 inch bearings, you know, like spherical bearings, Baldy racing hubs, big rotors, big brakes, big rear axle housing, billet trailing arms, all the stuff. Seat package, harness package. We have a comms package yet? I don't think we have a comms package yet. A bunch of miscellaneous items. And then power steering components. The one issue that we talked about last time, and it's not an issue, but just one of the challenges is figuring out powertrain for this thing. We didn't want to just go with an LS. We started going Toyota. So, you know, some sort of a derivative of a Toyota engine and a Toyota platform would be optimal, but opting out of stock with the supercharger, something more, went down different paths. You know, phone calls with Robbie Gordon and his chief engine engineer in North Carolina at the engine place, or his facility. Conference calls with him, talks with Steve Morris. I reached out to a bunch of people, and then what we landed on, you know, thanks to Pilgrim 2, is Nelson. Tom Nelson is going to be building us an engine for this. It's a Brodix block, Brodix heads, Bryant crank. What is the fucking cool number? I want to say it's like a 560 something cubic inch Chevy, big block Chevy, fully built with a 3.8 liter Whipple on top. They're expecting, you know, detuned somewhere in 12 to 1300 horse, upwards of 14 to 15 if you wanted it spicier, but we're just going to try to have something conservative here. So full Nelson Racing Engines package on this with a big blower. The torque is the most impressive thing. Tom is saying that there is no torque curve, so on demand at idle, you're getting 1,200 foot-pounds of torque. I did the loose math on that for a heavy truck with really parasitic loss style, you know, drivetrain, and we're still at 840 wheel horsepower front and rear. So I can't wait for that. I am so excited for that. I've always wanted to work on a car and put a Nelson engine in it, and we're going to do that with this. We're going to mate it up to a HP 90, 8 HP, HP 90. HP 90, I think that's where we're at. It's a Chrysler gearbox. So we have our work cut out for ourselves. That's why the engine mounts are not going to work, but there's going to be a little bit of a build process with the engine. So I think what we'll do is we'll get through most of the car without having the engine, because it's going to take some time. We'll get the engine complete with a mil-spec wiring harness, with a M150 Motec on it, with a engine dyno tune, and then I'm going to have to package it in. I think some of that firewall is going to have to move. The whole system is going to come complete. So we'll have AC on there, we'll have a DC power alternator, we'll have a daily dry sump, multi-stage dry sump. All the accessory drive will be on there. If you look up like Nelson Racing engines, they're these gorgeous engines, and then it's spec'd in all black. So this whole car is going to be all black. We're not going to stray from that. We ordered new wheels. We're going for Innovate still, but it'll be a TT pattern, so 6 on 6.5. Same thing, all black. And I forget which one, G800s, I think. I know this thing's just like bare bones, but this is what we had to do to weld it. So that's going on. Jason Hurd is doing the rear housing, TT hubs, 4-inch housing. Mitch is revising our billet trailing arms that he did for Kevin's Raptor. So same deal, except spec to this car, and then with removable skids on the bottom. We're also gonna put a little Selena logo into the trailing arms. And then we're gonna, Cho's gonna get going on his stuff. So process for this is just an update. I don't know if it's super wholesome with the amount of work, but what I am doing is I am filming my welding process with this. So if this is not, if the actual work and the welding is not in this episode we're watching, then there will be a follow-up Fab Diaries of me going through this thing. The other thing we need to do, and if you guys have recommendations, is for shooting content, and Joey, maybe you already know, but shooting content with welding, I need to have a separate lens that can be with the camera, because at this point I'm shooting, like I'm filming welding, but it's just a bright light that's flashing. And the last time we did the 2-part thing with the TIG welding for the root pass and the cover pass, I took like a lens from a welding helmet and kind of just staged it there, and it was very primitive, and I don't think it's ergonomically, like, it's not effective for doing multiple angles and setups. Really, this is just to explain the process. So I'm gonna weld everything out. Everything that's here is fine. The good part about this build is we built everything to be on a sub-assembly. So the main chassis stays and lives here. If anything ever rolls or takes damage, all the stuff bolts on, and you're not cutting stuff off the chassis. You just undo the bolt and either repair it or you replace it. One of the demands, 3 demands for the powertrain, because at this point, this is gonna turn into a truck that's built around the engine. It's not just an LS, it's gonna be nasty. And so what we have to do is we have to package things specifically for that. The radiator that was up here was a 3-fan, they call it a pre-runner radiator. It's like a low strung wide rectangle. That is gonna be transformed into just an intercooler. So Tom said, we need to have a dry sump, preferably 5-gallon can for the sump tank. We need to have the biggest intercooler we can possibly come up with, and we have to have a radiator that's somewhere in the ballpark of 36 by 30 inches with 2 17-inch fans. So the solution there is the radiator will not fit up here, but what is here will be a massive intercooler. So the intercooler will be, I'm gonna preserve all the mounts here because we have trays and everything. So PWR is just gonna replicate an intercooler into the radiator area. We're good. This is where it's a solid win. You know what I'm gonna get to, right? You know what it's gonna need, Joey? It's gonna have to have the radiator in the rear. So unfortunately, it's gonna have to have a roof scoop. Let me get a ladder. So by previous lessons, specifically with Vivian, the air void back here is like, it sucks. Pulling air from the bottom of the car, it just sucks, it doesn't work. Putting a radiator at this angle and pulling from the bottom still doesn't give it. So I think what we have to have is a radiator like this, that possibly can come out somewhere in this ballpark. So right there, that's 32 inches. We're gonna get the 36 pretty easy here. Yeah, so this is right where my finger is 36. So right off the bat, we have a solid win. But what I do is have the fans pull. So 2 17 fans, that'll probably be staggered. So one would be like a little higher up and then one will be diagonally down there. But what we'll get is like, we'll have to have something like this Big functional roof scoop. You know, you have 2 spares here, so the tin work, I'm thinking that the tin work will drop off and there'll be an RTL bar back here. You know, you'll just put some kind of curve into this thing. I promise you it'll look good. But that's what's gonna need to happen. So trans cooler and oil cooler can still live in the void down here. The sump tank has to find a home, and I think it has to be back here too. So the packaging is gonna be a thing, but we're gonna make it work. So a 5-gallon tank and a trans cooler and an oil cooler. The thing with the trans coolers and the oil coolers, I don't think they require a ton of movement of air. They just don't wanna have tons of hot air. So like, as long as there's a place for them just to move fluid, they're good. I've seen trans coolers in crazy, heinous, useless areas, and you know, that's just technically all they need. So I feel confident we'll get sump, trans, oil, all back here. Batteries will have to be somewhere creative. I think there's room for them under the seats. And then that radiator is gonna dominate, you know, so there might have to be a sub-assembly out here that holds this thing. I've even thought about it, and I just don't, it sucks, but you know, these are tacked on. And if you built the car out where it had something bigger, I know it would look ugly when it doesn't have skin on it, but the thing is, if it rolls, there's probably a possibility of you preserving your radiator if you just have structure, you know, go into that high point of wherever the radiator lands. So again, you know, if that's at 30 right here, you know, you'd have to run some kind of structure out here and draw it back down or draw it over, but that's ugly. So you'd almost have one here, you'd have another here, and then you'd have like a diagonal hit right here. It just, part of that, it's like seeing it all the way through, where when the vision is here for the scoop, and the scoop is such a functional piece, it never comes off, it lives on the car because it's doing exactly what it's supposed to do, to scoop and force air into the cooler. So things to expect for next time, you know, we're processing all these parts. Seat mounts need to go in, rear seat mounts need to be done, and then, you know, complete welding for sure. So all this stuff that's been gone through by someone else, I'm gonna go through it myself, prep it, re-weld it, make sure that we have our seal of approval on this stuff. I wanna get the front seats in for sure. If the backs aren't in, it's not as important as getting the fronts in, because that gives us the time to start designing the instrument panel. I love to have the clients incorporated with the dash and the instrument panel, because I can produce sketches for them and they can say what they like or what they don't like, and we can like go back and forth until we find something optimal for both of ourselves. And the best part about that is I only draw what I know I can build. So I can stand on the design, and it's exciting because then they know what they're getting. It's a big investment anyways. These dashes are expensive, and they get to like watch this thing get created, and at the end of the day, they look at this picture and they go, dude, this guy built the exact thing that this picture has, or better. So good opportunity. That motor already comes with Motec electronics. So we're gonna be able to have traction control, you know, driver aids like that. And then, you know, we're gonna bump up all the drivetrains. So the trans will be built. The transfer case will probably just be like an Atlas too. And then we'll have like RCVs, we'll have big axles. All the drivetrain gets to upgrade. So tank needs to go get a bladder, but I'd rather work with a raw piece like this and run tubes and structure and everything, and we'll send this off. Once we do all the legwork back here of the build out for structure and, you know, the hold down here, I think what we also talked about is, you know, there's a hold down that goes across here, which is your typical. We may have like an additional bumper or something. I don't know where the bedsides end, if they like end short of this, but you know, there's an opportunity here to have this whole bottom can be storage, where we can have it just bow out a little bit. It doesn't have to be like a full tire, or it matches the top tire, and that's the thing to do. Match the top tire and have the radius here, and you open this thing and it's complete storage. Or probably get even more space if you put the tire down here and then you build the storage up here, and you can even have this thing come out, you know, as like a box. That's the move for sure. But you know, then you have like a 13.5-inch project, 39-inch tire here. You have a structural tray, and then there's a complete removable piece that goes in here where you could run 2 spares, or you have this huge storage bay back here. And then we'll just dress everything else. The bed sides will go on. You know, we'll make sure the track width matches. The bed sides will go on, and then all the tin work is going to close this whole thing out just like we do. We'll close the chassis out, and then we'll close the bed side to the chassis out. And then this big, you know, this truck's going to be low. It's going to have camber in the front from the four-wheel drive. And, you know, now with this engine package, it's going to be super potent, and it's going to be this truck that's known for having a Nelson engine. So we're going to get a lot of wins out of this thing. Packaging the exhaust, it should all be pretty good. The Toyota Tundra frame rails are wide. So the pivots under there, they're out towards they're towards the outside of the cab, where the trailing arms aren't bowed. The pivots are not off the side of the frame. They're directly in line. So that leaves a lot of internal space for running exhaust and not, you know, having to do it in weird spots. But just proper planning on this whole thing. It should be exciting. And, you know, we want this thing to be like a Sinister, you know, like a dark horse. All black everything. So satin blacks, flat blacks, gloss blacks. As long as it's black, it's fine. And Tom Nelson, he has the same perspective. He's like, what I tell people is we'll do any color as long as it's black. So I think we're on the same page. He's super stoked on this thing as well. So grateful for these opportunities. One of the things looking around the shop is every one of these cars is like some form of a dream car. They're not basic. They're not typical pre-runners. They are all these expressions and these like art pieces that these clients that you guys want. And I'm so grateful for that, and so grateful for the opportunity. And it's important that we share all this. It's a legacy, and, you know, each of these things deserves the same amount of love. So thank you guys.